Hi everybody, Dr. Stringer again. I'm back talking to you this week about Chapter 12, which is actually Module 13. We're almost done with the semester, so I'm sure you all are thrilled to be able to put this behind you. Um, so this week we're going to talk a little bit about agency records, content analysis, and secondary data. Um, so this is all pretty self-explanatory, I think. Data from agency records, you might look at arrest statistics or sentencing data, things like that you might get from police departments or courthouses, corrections data you might get from prisons, stuff like that. And then secondary analysis, secondary data, is data that has been collected by somebody else that is available to you to analyze, to use for your research projects. And this is what I usually recommend that my graduate students use when they're conducting analysis. And actually, the data that you all are using for your SPSS labs is actually secondary data, right? Because you're not collecting it yourself, it's already there. I'm putting it in D2L for you, and you're just analyzing it to do your lab assignments. So you've already had some experience with secondary data. Content analysis is, usually looking at maybe newspaper articles, or you could even do it to look at, video content, YouTube. Some people have used Facebook or Twitter and analyze the content of these videos or documents or social media platforms or things like that, right? And so agency records, like I said, are usually pretty descriptive, yeah, and you can use them for exploratory analysis as well, depending upon what you're kind of looking at. And so they can be very useful. It's just getting them from the agencies that can be more challenging. Luckily, we have the FBI that collects arrests with the UCR data, and we have different other data sources we can get to as well to get these, agency records that makes them a little bit more easy to get to. Looking at, I already talked about the FBI, you have the Census Bureau, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the administrative offices of the U.S. courts. There's the National Center for State Courts. There's federal sentencing data. There's stuff all over the place. And a lot of what we use in criminal justice comes from official data because, if you're studying the criminal justice system, then where better to get your data than from the criminal justice system itself and have it be on the criminal justice system. So it makes sense, right? You can also get non-public agency records. So agencies produce data not routinely released. You can get sometimes maybe like police reports and things like that. And if you wanted to look at crime hotspots, you would need to get the geographic locations of where the crimes are committed, which is not published in the UCR data. So things like that, you can get as well, but you have to get it directly from the sources. So, new data collected, it's less costly and than other sources. There's also hybrid sources where it combines the collection of new data through observation or interviews and stuff like that with some of this criminal justice agency data, so to speak. But you do need to obtain cooperation from these organizations. They don't just give it to anybody. You usually have to know somebody. I was getting some data one time on drunk driving arrests when I lived in Virginia Beach on the Virginia from the Virginia Beach Police Department. And I knew the chief, and the chief had told them several times to give it to me, and they still wouldn't give it to me. And so the chief ended up having to go and discuss it with the people, and he wasn't too happy that they weren't listening to him. So even if you do know somebody, it's still hard to get this data. They don't want to give it to you a lot of times. Units of analysis and sampling. If you use agency records, they can kind of come in different levels. Might have individual level data or aggregate level data. You might have case level data. Or it might be counties or states or whatever. So figuring all of that out can be an important part of it, right? Units of analysis, looking at, incidents, crimes, court activity. So you might have defendants, you might have filings, you might have cases, appearances, dispositions, sentences, and this varies across all different types of criminal justice data: arrests, offenders, charges, counts. This is all different types you can have there. Virtually all criminal justice record keeping is a social process, right? It's a social production of data. And so we want to keep in mind that, this is data that's coming from people. People are making this data, and there is some discretion when they have there, and so there can be errors in it as well. Uh, and this might not be purposeful, it could just be, human error. Um, So content analysis, and this is generally called kind of the systematic study of messages. It could be documents, like I said, videos, uh, you know, social media. You decide what to watch, read, listen to, and time frame, and you analyze the collected data. And so similar to kind of interviews and stuff like that, you'll a lot of times want to wait and sample it until you get kind of this saturation effect where you start seeing the same thing over and over again. Uh, and so the process to that is kind of establish your universe, your units of analysis, sampling frame, so to speak, and then your sample. Communications need to be coded according to this conceptual framework. Uh, Choice between depth and specificity is an important thing to think about. When you're doing this, coding, and you can come up with any coding scheme that you really want to. So just remember that they have to be mutually exclusive and exhaustive, as with our coding that we did before. Um, so some people have done some stuff with newspaper stories about crime, and that's just one example. One time I did a paper with the number of words that the president used in his State of the Union speech to talk about drugs and how that was influenced perceptions of marijuana legalization and whether it should be legalized or not. And there's actually a significant relationship there. People are more against legalizing marijuana when the president talks about drugs and what the big problem they are than when he does less, which is interesting. You might look at violence in video games. That's another type of content analysis that you could look at. Um, you know, Declassifying or classifying gang-related homicides, how gang membership might facilitate homicides in different ways, is another good example, right? And so you got some details on that. Looking at secondary analysis, this is really one of the easiest ways to analyze some data because you don't have to collect it. You just pretty much download it like you all did from D2L. You would just download it from some other website and then analyze it and then write your paper. And so, it's cheaper, it's faster. You can benefit from the work of these skilled researchers and not have to collect your own data. The disadvantage is it might not be exactly appropriate for your research question. So if you're trying to test a specific theory, like maybe self-control theory or deterrence theory, there might not be the exact measures that you need in that secondary data, which can be, a big problem for you. If you need secondary data, then you might have to collect your own data if you really want to test that theory, right? Um, and so that was really all I had to say about those things. This is a pretty easy module, I think, so not too complicated. And we're starting to kind of wind down at this point. I know that, kind of in the middle of the semester, some of this stuff gets a little bit more challenging, but this stuff towards the end I feel like, is a little bit easier to digest and might not be as challenging for you all. So just letting you know that, and also the end is near. So please make sure to do your quizzes and your discussion boards and everything. And I look forward to talking to you all next week. All right, bye.